there and welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. We're at the Weston Brook Cadillac Hotel in Detroit, the site of the Business Leaders for Michigan CEO Summit. We will talk about Michigan's economy and attracting businesses in just a little bit, but first, the election. Tuesday night was one for the history books. We now have President-elect Donald Trump. Michigan was a key state in the end. How were the polls so wrong, and how does a divided country heal? Let's bring in Nolan Finley of the Detroit News, Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's great to see you. I felt like I wanted to text you all on Tuesday night, and I know that you were all working very hard.
You were the only one that did.
I was gonna say.
I'm sure the rest of the world was texting you. I just kind of want to get a sense now. Here we are, a couple days out from an election, a campaign season that was amazing and historic in so many different ways. Nolan, let me start with you in terms of what happened on Tuesday night, and I guess the overall, what can you say about it?
Well, I mean, first of all, there was nothing that strikingly unusual about Tuesday night. Americans tend to want change every 8 years. We had 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of Bush, 8 years of Obama. They tend to want to change up after a couple of terms of the same party being in charge. It's very unusual for a party to succeed itself. So you had that desire for change going on. You had one candidate who was dramatic change, and you had another candidate who was status quo. Well, I think one of the mistakes Hillary Clinton made was running as the incumbent, or running as an incumbent. I mean, she promised we'll continue to do things as they've been done. You're doing well, we're doing well. And there's a whole lot of people, particularly in rural America, and you saw great surges of votes from rural America who don't really think they're doing all that well, or don't feel as if they are. They're dissatisfied, they feel ignored. I mean, you look even in Michigan, Genesee County, which, you know, the Flint water crisis. Hillary Clinton spent a lot of time there, and yet Genesee County overperformed for Republicans in this election, overperformed for Donald Trump, and it speaks to this frustration, this sort of uneasiness people have that their lives aren't getting better, their jobs aren't coming back, their incomes aren't coming back.
Do you think that people had been listening to that segment of the population? Do you feel that we'd heard a lot from those voters before Tuesday night? I
think we did, but we were scared of what we heard, and we should have been. I mean, let's not overlook the message that the candidate who won sent out to the nation, that we should fear each other, that we should fear Muslim immigrants, that we should fear Arab Americans, that we should use stop and frisk to heal the racial fissures in the country, that we should build a wall with our brown-skinned neighbors to the south. There was a resonance of that message with the people who are legitimately frustrated economically. That is frightening. It's horrifying. Not since Andrew Jackson ran for the presidency on the sort of genocidal mission of dealing with the Native American population have we seen a candidate so openly embrace division and bigotry and win the presidency. So yeah, Nolan's not wrong about the economic dynamic that was at work here. It's just, it's only half of it, and the other half has a lot of people quaking at the prospect of a Trump presidency.
Let's look right now at Michigan and how everything turned out there. We saw the polls were tightening in the last couple of weeks, and we're within the margin of error, but not since 1988 had Michigan gone for a Republican presidential candidate.
No, and I'm not so sure. I don't buy into this narrative that the polls got it wrong. There was a reason those candidates spent so much time in Michigan. They saw Michigan tightening, and the polls showed Michigan tightening. Granted, nobody showed Trump. Nobody much showed Trump.
Him leading, Michigan.
But he was within the margin of error, and they showed a general tightening over the last month, and that's why those candidates came here. I think most of the polls I saw indicated that this was a tightening race, and when you have a race that's progressively getting tighter, you really can't project what's going to happen on election day.
And I think, but let's take a look at turnout, though, Stephen, and taking a look at the turnout.
That was the balance.
That Hillary Clinton didn't get the turnout of voters for her that Barack Obama got.
If you go back to just 4 years ago, which was lighter than 8 years ago, and add the voters who came out to support Barack Obama's re-election campaign to Hillary Clinton's totals, she wins Michigan. I think the same is probably true in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. That represents, and maybe in Florida, I'm not sure. I think there's something else sort of at work in states like that. But certainly in the upper Midwest, where we live, that was the balance of the election. Now, Hillary Clinton spent a lot of time here in the last couple of weeks of the election, last days of the election. She hadn't been to Wisconsin since the spring.
Well, she took that for granted. But
she took it for granted.
Why couldn't she excite those Obama voters?
Well, I mean, she's not Barack Obama. I mean, she never has been. And we've never seen a candidate, in fact, excite any part of the voter base as much as Barack Obama did. We set records in 2008 and 2012 for voting in this country, and especially in the African American community. I think the mistake we made was assuming that that was a reset and that we would see those numbers going forward. The numbers on Tuesday looked a lot more like 2004, before Barack Obama was ever a candidate. And maybe it's that we are now back to that as the normal, and that new normal that we thought he would establish is not taking place.
Well, then that changes assumptions, because we've been hearing for the last 7, 8 years that Republicans can never win the White House again because the demographics of the nation are working against them. Here they're back in the White House. You had not an overwhelming Hispanic vote for Republicans by any means, but 30% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump, more than voted for Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean,
there's a lot going on.
46% of women voted for Donald Trump, and you were told that wasn't going to happen. So I don't know that voters are as easy to predict, perhaps, as we think they are.
You have a demographic issue that is happening in the country, right? This is going to be a brown country. 10 years from now, this map would not be possible for anybody.
We didn't think it would be this time.
Well, the demographics aren't there quite yet. You also had, again, you have this surge of white voters pushing back against the notion of this country changing culturally. And for us not to acknowledge
and I want to get into that conversation right now, because you have a lot of people saying, yes, this is what Donald Trump said that he stood for.
Yeah.
But I have heard from so many people in the past 2 days that have said, well, I don't agree with everything that he said, but I didn't like her.
Right.
And so, but there are these feelings, though, that...
So people are willing to overlook naked bigotry to elevate something else that they feel over that. That shouldn't make black people or Latinos or Muslims feel any better, right? Our issues aren't seen. We aren't seen by so much of the public. And what they said on Tuesday was, you don't matter. You don't matter as much as these other things that are on my mind.
You look at the exit poll, and I saw an exit poll out of Ohio. 60% of the people who voted for Trump, 60% of the people who voted for Clinton said they don't like the candidate they vote for. So I don't think you can say the message resonated. A lot of people were holding their nose and voting. A lot of people said, I don't want a liberal Supreme Court. A lot of Republicans said that, and so they voted for Trump.
But that's not what I just
think
said.
any other Democrat would have beaten Donald Trump. The truth is the Democrats stood a very flawed candidate, a candidate who had tremendous baggage, a candidate they felt was dishonest, perhaps corrupt. Candidates matter. The people you run matter.
But what you're saying supports everything that I just said. What I said was people didn't see racism as important. People didn't see his bigotry as the single most important issue.
They were willing to overlook that, and that's what I think that you're saying is the danger there.
They were willing to sacrifice.
Or they didn't see that as being.
They didn't believe what he was saying.
But then my question coming from that is, how do you heal that feeling that there are people that feel that very much so, and thousands of them were in the streets of several cities on Wednesday night saying this is not our president.
Well, and then but you say that, and there were thousands of people in the street. Remember, coming into this, people were all about, well, will Trump voters accept the election? Will we have riots? Nobody said, will Hillary supporters riot? Will they accept the election?
Well, no
I think that's a little bit. They rioted in California. There was violence last night.
So the idea of people going out and express. So
it was a violent protest.
So everybody's in that barrel.
Well, you just tagged all Trump voters in one barrel.
No, I didn't.
And
I didn't.
I think what we talked about beforehand, it was all about what will Trump Trump voters do, and people assume that civility from the Hillary voters, and you're not getting it.
Well, civility. Let's talk about civility. Is it civil to talk about rounding up people and sending them away? Hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
Is it civil to talk about stop and frisk as a way to heal the nation's racial wounds? That's uncivil, okay? And lots of people went out and voted for it. They voted for that. African Americans have every reason to be fearful. Hispanic Americans have every reason to be fearful. Muslim Americans have every reason to be fearful. You make a mistake
when you think every Trump voter signed on to that agenda.
They did. They did.
We attacked Trump. I attacked Trump for saying I might not accept the results of the election, and that was the narrative. And now what's coming out?
Hang on. So let me ask you this then. We're now in this situation. We have President-elect Donald J. Trump. What can he say to quell some of those fears? Can people say, well, you know what, that was the campaign trail that now he's going to moderate a little bit more?
He's got to back away from it. This idea of a wall between our third largest trading partner and our next door neighbor is insanity. No way should that go forward. Already some people in his camp are saying, well, that was a metaphor for the idea of tightening up the border. That's a backing away. They're going to do that more explicitly. This idea of sewing a religious test into immigration policies into this country in contravention to the Constitution itself. You can't even put that on the table. The idea of appointing an attorney general like Rudy Giuliani, which is one of the names that's out there, somebody who was pioneering the idea of stop and frisk in New York, and all of the innocent people who were affected by that. You can't go down those roads. You are going to have to show that you were talking as a candidate about these things, but as the president of all of the United States, you can't do it.
There's got to be something
He's got to bend over
backwards.
I think he's got to bend over backwards to show that he's the president. As he said Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, I'll be the president of all Americans. I think he's got to bend over backwards to show it. I wrote this morning, Republicans have control now for the first time since 2008 of the White House and Congress. They've got to look at what...
Since 2006.
2006. They've got to look at what the mistakes the Democrats made when they were in that position and forced through an unpopular program, Obamacare, and then you got 2010 and the Tea Party. I think they've got to move very, very carefully. I would, if I were him, he's got a Supreme Court appointment. I would appoint a woman or a minority to sort of demonstrate that he's going to be the president. I would appoint Joan Larson.
I think he has to address. I think he has to address women as well.
I think that would be one way to do it. I think if the first thing he does is start laying bricks on a wall, he loses the American people and he loses his presidency.
So let's talk about the first thing he's going to do, and there is a lot of conversation about repealing Obamacare. And now you're looking at a Republican-led Congress. So what is the reality of that being his first agenda item?
Republicans know you can't repeal it. It's too far down the road.
What do you do?
You got to overhaul it. You got to fix it. That would have been the first priority item for both a Democratic administration and a Republican administration. You can't have people keep opening envelopes that say 20-25% increase. People are being killed by their insurance premiums, and it's having the opposite effect of its intent because people are having to drop their insurance.
Well, but the flip side of that is you have 20 million Americans who had no health insurance
and who
do now.
Some, half of them do. Half of them still don't.
20 million people have insurance who didn't before. You still have 20 million people. We have 40 million people who didn't. We have 40 million people who didn't.
But you're losing people every day who can't pay their premiums.
Hold on. We're down to the lowest level of uninsured people in the history of this country. You can't repeal Obamacare because you can't afford to send those people back out on their own. And so the question is, and this was always the bargain that was made, in order to do that, in order to get insurance for those people, someone was going to have to pay for it. The way we did it was by creating these private exchanges where people were going to have to go and do that. And there isn't a way to get this for free. The Republican idea that the market will take care of health care if you just let it is absurd. Poor people will be left out of that, and they were for years. So we're not going to go back to that because it's unjust.
The core mistake of Obamacare was it focused intently on access and not on cost.
Yeah, because
and if it had addressed cost first, you would have taken care of access. More people would have been able. More people would have been able to afford to buy health insurance. I think you've got to go back. Costs of health care are soaring out of control. You've got to bring them down. You've got to figure out best practices to make health care cheaper. You've got to do something about the cost of drugs. And as insurance costs drop, premium costs should drop, and you should be able to improve access.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at Obamacare, obviously Supreme Court. I think Donald Trump also has to do some things and clean up the lawsuits that are going to. He's going to have to be in court in a couple of weeks, or if he's going to settle that. And he also threatened to sue the women who came out and accused him of sexual assault, and he's going to have to address that in some way.
So magnanimity is one of the things that we have come to expect from the person who is the president of the United States, and it's hard to think of many instances in my lifetime, at least, where that hasn't been the case. Republican or Democrat, there's a certain way you behave as the most powerful person in the country and in the world. You don't go after your political enemies with arms of the government.
Do you think the office can change him, though? And that's what people are talking about.
It changes everybody. I mean, if you've ever talked to someone before they were president and then after, and I've had 2 opportunities to do that, there is an instant change to sitting in that chair. There is an instant change to the amount of information that you are privy to every day. There is an instant change because of the weight of responsibility that comes with the decisions that person has to make every single day. I mean, it's a dizzying array of things. I don't know that Donald Trump, narcissistic and egotistical as he is, will be able to overcome that. It will change him too. The question is, does it change him for the better, or does it change him for the worse?
I think he got off to a good start Tuesday night. I didn't know what to expect when he walked out on the stage, and that was not the Donald Trump you'd seen on the campaign trail, who was out there on that stage Tuesday night. I think he helped himself with that. If he can maintain that tone, if he can put the people around him who can sort of temper his worst instincts and keep his temper under control, that's going to be the biggest challenge for him, because presidents come under all sorts of attacks and all sorts of personal attacks. And if he's going to flare up every time like he did on the campaign trail, he's not going to be effective. I count on his children, who seem to be very reasonable, very intelligent people, his daughter particularly, to sort of keep him within the bounds.
It'll be interesting what role they play in that administration.
Yes.
You know, we've seen that not frequently in history, but he has the opportunity to have his kids play important roles.
If I were him, I'd put Kellyanne Conway right at his side, because she managed to keep him on script, at least during the tail end of the campaign.
You know, a couple other things that we're going to have to address next time on MiWeek. We're going to have to take a look at statewide in terms of gaining some seats, and so Republican-controlled House and Senate again, and also the defeat of the RTA ballot proposal, which the next question is, okay, what now? What do we do? And we're going to have to pick that up. So we're just going to have to leave the politics talk for here right now.